You think showing up in jeans and a frayed shirt gives you credibility. The woman's voice cut the hush, sharp as a scythe. Let's see you explain this then. She held the heavy envelope at arm's length. Open it now. His hands were steady as he broke the seal, every movement measured beneath the silent gaze of the board. Papers spilled out, fanning across polished oak. Why's that so familiar to you? She asked, voice lower this time. He sifted to the notarized page, eyes never leaving hers. Because you sent it to the wrong person, he replied, voice even. A secretary in the back gasped. She leaned in, knuckles whitening on the table's edge. You don't belong here, not with them. He picked up the page, holding it just beyond reach. There's more than one kind of thief in this room. Across the table, the youngest board member dropped his pen, startled by the words thrown like stones. For a tick, no one moved. Her lips parted to retort, but no sound emerged. The whole world hovered in that hush. Stay for the truth. It started 6 days earlier at 7:18 on a Thursday morning. Engine oil streaked David Granger's knuckles as he reached through the battered fuse panel in an empty tract home just past the edge of town. Socket wrench, torque meter, a plastic folder of invoices in the open toolbox. The sun had not cleared the shoulder of the foothills. His blood sugar had again slipped low overnight, tongue thick and slow, but he pressed on. That day, like every other, ran by numbers. School opens 7:50, Mia's lunch packed 7:17, meter starts ticking at 8:02, and now, the ringing demand of someone else's urgent install on a house unlikely to be anyone's home soon. He was almost done tightening the new breaker when a voice, pitched to scatter crows from a fence post, carried over the echoing drywall. Is he the one? A woman in pressed navy, hair swept into a no-nonsense twist, stalked into the front room, followed by 2 men with clipboards. Unmoved, David wiped his ring finger clean and kept on kneeling, waiting. That's him, Mrs. Lockridge, the older inspector's voice dipped. There was an incident. The 2 words hung like frost in the dusty morning. Her gaze, icy and practiced, landed on him. So you think it's acceptable to work here after what you've done? She said. The hallway, stripped down to insulation, pulsed with the attention of curious onlookers from next door. Tools missing from last week's job, you're the only one with access. David stood, slow joints deliberate as a hinge. I log out every tool I touch, ma'am, he said quietly. His voice always dropped a degree in moments like this, calm and unhurried, the only signal he allowed his pulse. Check the sheet or the camera by the south door. Those records don't mean much if someone wants them to lie, she retorted. In my view, you're just another temp looking for a shortcut. Something flickered beneath her words, tiredness masked in vinegar. He pressed his thumb in a pattern on the cracked invoice folder before tucking it under his arm. That's your view, my sheet S in the lockbox. His left hand curled tight behind his back, not in anger but to keep from trembling, the blood sugar dip beginning its slow, familiar burn. Lockridge turned to her assistants. Off-site, pull the badge logs, and someone check his ID. Her stiletto heels clicked across exposed plywood as she swept back toward her waiting car, already on to her next judgment. He folded the day's repair ticket once, twice, then a third time with care. This would not end here. Always, when David turned the worn brass key in the lock that evening, there was peace on the threshold, even if the world behind him ran to timer ticks and scribbled bills. One step and the slow charge of silence shifted, broken by a giggle from the couch, a flash of pink pajama feet leaping over couch cushions. Daddy, guess how many marshmallows I put in? Mia beamed, clutching her battered bunny by one ear, the left button eye loose again after last week's playground disaster. He set the tool bag down, slower than he wanted, catching his breath with the kind of subtlety he'd practiced. Palm on kitchen counter, thumb finding the glucose tab in his back pocket. More than should be legal, he guessed, feigning sternness. He'd never get it right, and she'd never tire of the game. She grinned, squinting. Did the lady yell at you again? The bunny's one glossy eye seemed even more accusatory. Are you tired of always having to fix stuff? David's hand hovered over the lunchbox he'd set out the night before, smoothing the post-it note he slipped inside. Remember, big things start small, Dad. His tone softened. Sometimes people get loud when they're afraid they're not heard, that's all. Mia wrinkled her nose. You never yell. The bunny bobbed in silent agreement. He reached across the table, fingers brushing a photo that still lived under the cracked phone. Her mother, eyes as deep-set as Mia's, hospital ID bracelet peeking from her sleeve. In a drawer nearby, a framed certificate gathered dust, Rhodes Scholar 2011. But it always faced the wall. The world remembered what it wanted. He pulled a soft blanket over his daughter as she finished her cocoa, the bunny tucked tight in the crook of her arm. The sharp flicker of a hospital wristband, caught in the lamplight, drew his mind for a moment back to the night they lost Mia's mother. Even now, he could see her gentle smile, one flash and then gone. "Do you worry you'll forget her?" Mia asked suddenly. Her thumb pressed the bunny's nose, hesitant. He sat heavy for a moment, then he straightened. "She's right here, button eye and all." "You think so?" He nodded, folding one small sock. "I know it." He tidied a set of invoices near the stove, making sure the overdue utility bill was hidden under a kid-drawn crayon galaxy. For now, Mia's world had enough stars. She ran her finger along the note inside her lunchbox, mouth working silently. He smiled, taking in the quiet. Tomorrow, another round would begin. Edith Lockridge studied the city below through polarized glass. Even in the luxury of her top-floor suite, the cold quiet pressed against her. Flurries skated past the window. Below, headlights tracked patterns even she couldn't predict. She scanned her phone, thumb pausing on a text. Call from Lincoln High, trouble again after curfew. Beside the phone, a bottle of bright pink pills lay uncapped, the prescription label tinged with the corners of the city's most familiar pharmacy. "Schedule 10 minutes with PR, get me numbers on last month's expulsions," she said crisply, snapping her notebook shut. "Order arrives at 8, don't sign for it until I'm there," her voice clipped. "Send a car for Kennedy, now." Her assistant, Gloria, hovered in the doorway, face set in careful neutrality. "The electricians at the Riverbend project are behind again." Lockridge poured 2 fingers of mineral water, letting it sit untouched. "Replace the foreman." "There's been an accusation tool theft." Gloria's eyes flickered up, then away. "One worker named in particular." Lockridge's hand hovered over a faded Snapchat printout, her daughter, Aubrey, backstage at a school play, forced smile faltering. She tucked it face down under a contract. "Handle it, we don't need loose ends." Behind the desk, an old envelope, her father's handwriting, block letters. "Finish well." She never showed it, she never moved it. Its corners were softened from years of turning. "Anything else?" "There's pressure from the board on next week's vote," Gloria ventured. Lockridge's expression was carved from stone. "No one replaces experience. I worked too long to have this appended." Her eyes slid back to her phone. "And this, Granger, make sure HR flags his file. I don't want him near the school site." "Understood," Gloria replied, voice a touch gentler. Lockridge exhaled, locking the old envelope in her briefcase before standing. She glanced once more at the city's patchwork glow, each window, another stage in a game she could never quite stop playing. She turned her back. The glass held no answers, only her own shape dissolving into night. The cold was worse at dawn when David crossed to the new charter school's parking lot, wire strippers dangling from his belt, sweat clinging beneath his collar despite the chill. Contractors in high-vis jackets argued near a half-assembled generator. "Main relay's dead. We can't power the admin wing," a site supervisor grumbled, shoving a schematic at everyone and no one. "I called twice. No one can get it started." Rattled voices tricked from every angle, someone else's crisis born of cut corners and half-truths. David approached, hands open. "Was the panel grounded yesterday?" he asked the nearest apprentice, voice unhurried. "Yeah, I think so." One of the architects, eyebrows pinched, snapped. 3 union foremen tried everything. David knelt, scanning the bolts and wires. Red tape fluttered from a sheared conduit. His fingers brushed a cable, twisted just the wrong way, insulation nicked where it met the engine casing. He tweaked the connection, recalibrated, then glanced over the blueprints. "Not the relay," he said softly. "It's the actuator switch. Back corner wires reversed. See the color codes." The foreman stared, then shaded his eyes, squinting. "Hell, no one caught that." The generator coughed once, then fired to life as David completed the circuit. Near him, the young security guard, Oscar, watched wide-eyed. You just figured that out looking. It's the simple things. David handed back a wrench, then stood, stretching his shoulder. Lockridge arrived 15 paces away, arms crossed, mouth set. Lucky guess, she called to the assembly. Anyone could have done that. Her gaze slid over Oscar, dismissing the entire scene with a twitch of the lip. Oscar watched her go, the question already forming. As David packed up, Oscar slipped toward him, tone uncertain. You ever fix planes? He asked, half joking. David shook his head, smile quiet. Not since college. Wiring's wiring, though, just follow the colors. Oscar, mind racing, said nothing. But he had seen things like this before, 20 years working security with the old guard, long before new management swept in. He wondered and he watched. Oscar's suspicion festered through the afternoon. While the staff lunchroom buzzed over the day's fiasco, Oscar sat with his phone, bouncing names between search engines until, amid LinkedIn debris and old faculty lists, David J. Granger surfaced, not just as a contractor, as something else, a record of declined faculty appointment after a national teaching award, a Rhodes Scholars archived speech snippet pulled from the subbasement of the web. A man turned down tenure at 30. Why? Oscar read again, the letter of offer. Our institution would be honored, a scanned signature and official seal. A quick check of the school badge system found a note, proprietary Granger wiring diagram, same hand, too neat to be coincidence. Meanwhile, at home, Mia prepared her backpack, Bunny perched like a sentry atop her lunchbox. Dad, why doesn't anyone want to help her? She asked, nodding at a class newsletter photo on the fridge, the woman from earlier featured front row center. She looks tired. David's dish sponge paused midway in the sink. Because sometimes, he began, people forget help aloud, even for them. She blinked, but she needs a friend. The sentence hovered in the air, light as air and twice as dense. Across town, the clock hit 3:47. School enrollment deadline, Friday, 5 p.m. Oscar read the notice, eyes widening. Forms due tomorrow, no exceptions. Pressure built, a low tide rising. Later in the parking lot, a suited man blocked Oscar's way. Lost security. Oscar matched the man's flat stare, looking for someone frank. You don't need to, I hear you're asking questions. Frank's tone was low, more threat than warning. Just doing my job, Oscar didn't step back. Frank flicked dust from his lapel, stick to doors and cameras, don't play detective. He stalked off, phone already raised. Meanwhile, David, hands still coated with steel dust, was handed a check by an HR clerk with trembling fingers. For today's incident, she said, they'd rather you didn't come back. He pressed the check back quietly. I didn't come for the money. But he took the school enrollment form, unsigned, and placed it gently alongside his daughter's Bunny. The deadline loomed, the game had changed. Rain lashed the street as David unplugged a damaged extension cord outside his building, only to find his access card suddenly inactive. An old landlord, uncomfortable, shrugged. Sorry, kid, Miss Lockridge's people called, said you're a risk. 12 hours before enrollment closes, that's all. Upstairs, Mia's lunchbox waited. No note today, she asked, Bunny hugged to her chest. Tomorrow, he replied, his restraint visible in the slight tension of jaw, fingers fidgeting with a crumpled glucose tab. Tomorrow always needs a note. As she drifted off, the phone vibrated, a text from Oscar, it's time. Across the city, Lockridge stood before the board, voice crisp. Remove his clearance everywhere. I want proof he's nowhere near our projects by morning. As she spoke, Oscar watched from the hallway, hesitated, then ducked into an alcove to dial a number from the old faculty listing. It's Oscar. Yes, you can come now. His words carried the weighted patience of someone who knows storms that don't end on their first strike. The next morning, Mia was called to the principal's office. You sat with Hannah in class again, the secretary asked. She was lonely, Mia replied, squeezing her Bunny tighter. No one should sit alone. Out in the hallway, David waited, posture straight if a little too still. He should not have made this her problem. The boardroom carried a chill even before the rain that Friday morning. Lockridge sat at the head, legal team fan to her right, board members arrayed like silent sentries. A gilded clock ticked behind her. "Let us be clear why we're here," she announced, eyes locked on David as he entered, Oscar flanking him. "Security matter, for the record." Her voice, always low, now held the nuance of exhaustion sharpened to a razor. A courier entered, briefcase balanced against his hip. He held his badge, then offered a sealed envelope with 2 legal stamps. "Urgent delivery for the chair." Lockridge snatched the envelope. "I'll open it," she snapped. "Now," board members stilled, assistants drew breaths as she broke the seal, fingernails white with pressure. Paper spilled out, official notary swirls visible even from a distance. "Looks like you knew this was coming," Lockridge said, tossing the stack toward David. He moved, steady, methodical, never hurrying even with every eye on him. He didn't touch the documents first. Instead, his gaze swept the cover pages, finding the single sheet he already half expected. Letterhead from the state's education authority, then the familiar handwriting of a signature he'd declined years before. Oscar's voice filled the silence. "Madam Chair, we ran your candidate's application. There's a match right here." An assistant's hand shook, pen tapping against her palm. The board's youngest member didn't move except to lower his head, hands flat on the polished mahogany. Lockridge pressed, voice brittle as paper, "You don't belong here, not with them." David lifted a solitary notarized page, holding it fractionally out of reach. "There's more than one kind of thief in this room." Oscar's eyes never left Lockridge as she leaned in, reading, understanding now with all the air gone from the space around her. The legal clerk in the back gasped, the clock's tick suddenly deafening. Lockridge's reply when it came was hoarse, "Who sent this?" David's answer was a whisper, "You already know." For a suspended moment, no one spoke. Oscar shifted, allowing the silence to hold, giving the room time. The courier, unnoticed now, closed his bag, eyes averted. Lockridge tried to speak, lips parting, but the confession clung now between her hands, the words unspoken. The hush broke only when she met David's gaze and for once had nothing to say. "There's more than one kind of thief in this room." 6 months wandered by quietly. The school board named a new chair, Oscar accepted a permanent post as facilities manager, and a photograph of the reassembled admin wing, wires neat and shining, hung in the entryway, unnoticed by all but a few. Lockridge, in a passing headline, was described only as former board chair. The world spun on. Mia, now a second grader, slid into the school cafeteria, Bunny, still missing his left button eye, clutched in the crook of her elbow. A new lunch note, crisp and sure, found inside. "You already know how to help." Dad's handwriting looped steady. She spied David at the pickup circle before he saw her. "Dad, are you still fixing things?" she asked, voice lower now. He knelt on the grass, smiled, really seeing her this time. "Not everything needs fixing. Sometimes it needs listening." She nodded, the bunny's ear compressed in a fist. "That's harder." He agreed for once, but worth it. He stood, offered her his hand, and in that late afternoon light, they walked toward the quiet, where everything waited not to be solved, but to be heard. Sometimes, vindication doesn't roar or triumph in victory. It's found in the space left behind when silence is finally allowed a shape. And there, if you listen closely, you might just hear what's truly needed, curling in the distance. A truth only spoken once the noise recedes. A month after the headlines faded, new rhythms settled into David and Mia's world. Winter's edge lost its bite, schedules eased, and bills, once insurmountable, slid into gentle routine, paid off with careful ticks of extra shifts and patient budgeting. For the first time in years, David met the mornings without counting minutes toward some looming threat. The cracked kitchen tiles still rocked beneath his heel as he packed Mia's lunch, but it seemed less like bad luck and more like something that simply belonged, like the faded mittens by the door and the laddered notes on the fridge. Mia, now bold enough to pour her own cereal, darted around in pink socks. She had started to hold her bunny by both ears, the left one mended with blue thread thanks to a teacher who noticed and cared. "Does Oscar work at my school now?" she asked one April morning, sticking out her tongue as she shaped a K with Cheerios on her plate. He waved at me. David nodded, adjusting the shoulder strap of her backpack. "He makes sure everyone's safe." She thought about that. "Did he help you?" Her eyes, always gauging the weather of grown-ups, waited for something beyond the usual answer. He helped me by believing the truth, David said, even when others didn't. Mia's smile was slow, as if considering a secret. That's what friends do. The days unfolded not perfectly, but with new steadiness. There were still late-night runs for glucose tabs and times when paperwork stacked up beside David's elbow like a leaning tower, but now a small lightness ran underneath. He no longer checked his phone after dinner for crisis voicemails. Instead, he learned each habit of peace as if they were repairs to a fragile circuit, the right voltage, the right patience. May brought a letter stamped with the public school's crest. Its words were spare. Mr. Granger, we invite you to consult on curriculum integration for repair and technology courses effective fall. David read it at the kitchen counter, hands suddenly unfamiliar. The offer didn't promise glory or riches, but it sketched a place at last. A place to build, to teach, to pass on what couldn't quite be contained in any invoice. He left the letter by Mia's juice glass where she found it in the morning. Will you be in my school now? She asked, hope and dread warring in her tiny voice. Was it embarrassment or pride? Sometimes, he told her, but mostly I'll be in the background, helping when it counts. That evening, Oscar visited their flat carrying a bag of old board games. They played well beyond bedtime, laughter skating across the ceiling. You made the right kind of noise, Oscar remarked later, carding through the dog-eared Monopoly bills as Mia drifted to sleep in the next room. I only said what I wish someone had said for me years back, David replied. There was no bitterness, just a measured gratitude, as if he had learned to carry old hurt with the same practicality as a socket wrench. Oscar glanced at the photo of Mia's mother still tucked beneath a chipped magnet. You did what was needed, no more, no less, place is the better for it. He hesitated, then reached into his jacket, producing a faded badge from 2 jobs ago. Keep this, you don't need it, but it helps to remember where you've been. David pressed the badge into his palm, nodding. It was nothing and everything, a little proof the world sometimes looped back not to erase pain but to limit in understanding. Meanwhile, the school thrummed with changes. Teachers moved furniture, and the principal, emboldened by the new board, reversed protocols set during Lockridge's reign. Mia's teacher, Mrs. Klein, recruited David to explain the mysteries of basic wiring to a conference of 8-year-olds, a performance greeted with rapt, half-understood awe. Electricity is like trust, David said, sketching lines on a whiteboard. It needs the right path to flow, block it or twist it, things break down, let it through, and everything lights up. One boy raised a hand. What if the wires go the wrong way? David smiled. Then you check the colors, fix the mistake, and start again. Everyone learns, even the grown-ups. Mia, crisscross-legged at the front, clutched her bunny in one hand and whispered to Hannah, the girl she'd befriended on the first hard week of school. Told you, she said, half proud, half shy. Days later, Mrs. Klein pressed a note into David's palm as he collected Mia from aftercare. Thank you, it read, for showing the kids fixing things is honest work, and that mistakes can be set right. Lockridge in exile kept mostly out of sight. She had retreated to a smaller condo, the city's skyline now only a sliver through her window. The air was sharper there, a physical reminder of boundaries reshaped. Her daughter Aubrey came less often, but when she did, she asked pointedly, Did you ever believe it all mattered, all those arguments at the dinner table? Lockridge found herself with no ready answer. The envelope her father had once sent, "Finish well," sat at the bottom of her closet, its words now heavy with memory. She kept it anyway, perhaps out of stubbornness, perhaps because someday she might read it differently. It was June before David and Mia, hand in hand, walked the path to the river, grass up to Mia's shins, bugs swirling like sparks. They reached the footbridge where Mia's mother used to bring her on rare good days. She stopped, looking down at the water, the bunny held between them like a talisman. Do you think Mom sees us? Mia's voice was the hush of dusk, uncertain but wanting. David knelt, his knees creaking. I think love lasts longer than a memory. Sometimes it walks beside us. Sometimes, when it's quiet enough to listen, it's right here. He pressed his palm briefly to her chest, feeling the thump of her small, invincible heart. They stood for a while, saying nothing, the river's rush a lullaby. After a time, Mia tugged his hand. Let's go home. The summer brought its small joys, bike rides with training wheels, dinners on the stoop, the easy laughter of new friends. Oscar joined them often, and sometimes Mrs. Klein, and once even the principal, each a rival another star in the modest constellation of their lives. Mia grew that year, her hair longer, her gaze more direct. On her first day of third grade, she found a note in her lunchbox. Remember, not everything broken is meant to be fixed. Some things need attention, some just need a hand to hold. She was the one to wave goodbye this time, running off before David could say all the things a parent means to say and never quite manages. David stayed a moment, watching her disappear into the flow of children. He felt the world tilt and caught himself smiling, not because all was well, but because, for once, it was enough. Oscar sidled up beside him, carrying a toolbox and wearing a new cap branded with the school's logo. "You coming inside, Professor?" David laughed. "Just a contractor," he demurred. "You keep telling yourself that," Oscar gestured toward the open door. "Kids'll be waiting." As he followed Oscar inside, David noticed Mrs. Klein gesturing for him through the glass. The admin staff had questions about ceiling fans and summer thermostats. Someone else bent over a jammed printer. Outside, the wind lifted, bending the grass, sending birds wheeling above the playground. Mia's laughter, high, clear, rippled across the yard, sweeter than any piano sonata he'd taught years before. He took a deep breath, tools in hand, heart unburdened by the need for vindication. Repair was no longer a performance. It was simply the work of each day, mending what was broken, listening where needed, leaving light in his wake. On a gray afternoon, autumn, years from crisis, but with all its lessons still bright, David and Mia returned to the old river footbridge. The trees' copper leaves drifted onto the water below, swirling in the familiar, unhurried current. Mia, now tall enough to see from the rail, let her bunny, a little ragged, both eyes sewn tight, hang over the edge. She didn't ask about her mother this time. Instead, she said quietly, "I think I understand, Dad, about listening." David squeezed her hand. "What do you hear?" Mia closed her eyes, the wind, the hush, the world breathing in and out. "Everything," she said, a smile in her voice. He looked at her, at everything they'd rebuilt and everything they'd learned to let be, and found that yes, it was true. Some things do not need fixing. Some things only need to be witnessed, honored by patient attention. They turned to leave, sun lighting their path home. No lessons left, nothing dramatic, just the ongoing work of care, day in and day out. After all the noise, vindication, defeat, justice, only the simple music of love and effort, echoing even as silence gently claimed the rest. And that at last was enough. Saturday mornings in October, the school gym echoed with community. Parents unpacked folding tables, teachers poured coffee, students darted beneath banners painted for Fall Fest. Above it all, the scent of cinnamon and cut grass mingled, spilling out the side doors into clear, cold air. David finished reattaching a loose speaker wire at the edge of the stage, his toolbox open at his feet. Oscar balanced a coil of extension cord on one elbow, mock exasperated. "You'd think with as much as you've taught these kids, someone else could handle the sound system." David grinned. "Old habits," he said, tightening the last connection. "Besides, some things you want done yourself." "True," Oscar said, handing him a cup of coffee with both hands. "You here as a dad or a consultant today?" "Today I'm just crew," David replied. He scanned the room, found Mia among a knot of classmates. She was explaining the rules of some invented game, bunny gripped beneath one arm, blue-threaded ear flopping with each gesture. A familiar voice startled him. "Mr. Granger, there's a light flickering in the hallway." He turned, Mrs. Klein, ever watchful, clipboard in hand. "On it," David promised. Oscar followed, the two vanishing into the stream of arriving families, laughter and music trailing after. Down the corridor, as David unscrewed a warped fixture cover, Oscar leaned against chipped paint. "You notice anyone nervous about today?" David shook his head. "Not like before, it's just fall now, everyone belongs." Oscar smiled, but his eyes were heavy with old wars. "Funny, isn't it? Quiet is its own reward." David's hands worked steady as always, but his reply came from somewhere deeper. "I used to think if I just straightened every wire, made every system foolproof, everything else would fall into place," he said. Turns out it was never about perfection, just making sure the lights came on and someone could trust they would. Oscar nodded. Trust is a circuit too. A crash, then laughter rang out from the gym. They returned to find Mia perched at the very edge of the stage. Around her, her friends clapped as she recited the only part she could recall from her mother's favorite poem. The world's more than wires and rules, it's what you notice and what you mend. David felt something tighten, then settle in his chest. Mrs. Klein caught his eye, gave a conspiratorial wink. Lockridge did not appear, her absence now a silent fixture at such gatherings. But there was no sharpness in her missing presence now, only a softness, the kind left by time and the work of forgiveness, however incomplete. Mia hopped down from the stage, darting to her father's side. "Did I do okay?" she whispered. David knelt, brushing stray confetti from her shoulder. "You did perfectly," he said. The words cost him nothing and meant everything. She glanced up at the bright gym lights, then back at him. "Will the lights always work now?" He could only answer her honestly, "Not always, but when they go out, someone will be there to fix them." She smiled, reassured, and pulled him into the crowd. The music played on, parents and children alike caught up in the warmth of ordinary celebration. Oscar, surrounded by a cluster of third graders asking about the security cameras, caught David's eye and mouthed, "You're on duty." David laughed and raised his coffee in salute. And as dusk fell through the gym windows and the laughter thinned, David walked Mia home along the familiar street, each step quiet, grateful. There would always be repairs to make in dark spots waiting for light, but now he knew. Sometimes it was enough just to be present, to listen, to let what was mended be, and to carry the rest with kindness. Between them, the bunnies swung in time with their steps, a little frayed, held together by patches and threads, but loved beyond all measure. And David, heart full in the fading day, understood that was the true work all along. They turned, door closing softly behind, the noise of the world left at the threshold. Home was not perfect, and it didn't need to be. It simply needed care and a steady hand. And that at last was more than enough.